Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Tuesday, the 7th day of May, 2024, and this is the first of our two episodes we're doing every day on the latest news that's coming across the wire that has something to do with last day's Bible prophecy. And we've got a lot of people watching for the first time here, a lot of new people signing up for our YouTube channel and watching on our app, EOW, Educating Our World with Don Stewart. Just know this, what we do here is not just the news. We give you the headlines, but only the headlines that have something to do with what the Bible says our world will be like at the time of the end, how it confirms last day's Bible prophecy. We always tell you how it confirms it in our explanation. Plus, we lead you to our various writings, our books, particularly the one, 25 Signs We're Near the End, which is on our website, Educating Our World. It's a free download, as all of our books are free downloads. On the site, we have 12 books under the subject of Bible prophecy that go into great detail about all these events that are happening and will take place. So we encourage you to download them, read it, and tell others about it. Again, everything is free. So thank you so much for shamelessly promoting the site, because we want to get the word of God out to the world. Well, overnight, it's not been dull in Israel. I got the little red alert app, Israel, which tells anytime they get a rocket attack. And as I turned on my computer and my iPad this morning, it said 62 different red alerts had come up overnight. And as I was starting this program here, another 5 just showed up. So Israel is getting it left, right, and center from Hezbollah, of course, in Lebanon there, as well as from still some shooting going on from what's ever left of the Hamas there now in Rafah. They're pretty much stuck there. And our headlines, of course, are the campaign of Rafah is now on. Like we said yesterday, it's on for sure. Israeli tanks have moved into the area. They've moved the humanitarian problem out of the way as much as they can. The great numbers of people that need to get out of the way of this. There's a lot of calls already for the U.S. to intervene. You have one from Palestinian Authority and the King of Jordan. Then we have this. We finally find out about Hamas's supposed agreement, what they agreed to. Remember yesterday, our second program, we said late last night, Hamas said, oh yeah, we're going to agree to the ceasefire proposal that Egypt and Qatar and the United States put forward. The problem is Israel wasn't notified about it at all, and there's a bunch of changes that were made, as we're going to see. If Israel does not end the war, instead of 33 hostages, they're only going to release 18. And of the 33, what we're going to see, Hamas's agreement was, well, they're not all alive. We consider dead hostages part of the deal. Well, in other words, 33 will include dead bodies, if you can believe something like that. Israeli officials say the U.S. knew about the changes, did not tell them. Israel thinks they've been had. And we talked about this last couple of days. There were stories that were saying this. The CIA director Burns is there basically working against Israel for the U.S. There's $1 billion worth of weapons that's been confirmed that have not arrived in Israel, waiting to arrive. The U.S. is holding them up for reasons we'll talk about. Sadly, there's a story about one Israeli lawmaker was at a meeting a while back with some of the Israeli military experts and says, why don't we produce these locally, some of these weapons? And he basically was shut down. Well, they wish they would have done that now, because like we said yesterday, over half of their weapons, Israel's weapons, comes from the U.S. Now, what's interesting to our final headline today will be a workaround the UN is trying to do to create a Palestinian state. The Security Council does not have the authority to do it because they need a unanimous vote, and the U.S. has always vetoed a Palestinian state, where they're trying to do some workaround now to create a Palestinian state apart from the U.S., and we'll talk about that. All right, let's go to the headlines. Campaign in Rafah is on big time. Palestinian Authority calls for the U.S. to intervene immediately to prevent Israeli invasion of Rafah. King of Jordan worries about this humanitarian disaster. And again, as you can imagine, we'd have other leaders around the world, we don't need to go into them, saying the same sort of thing. The UN in particular, it's the unimaginable disaster. Israel does this, et cetera, et cetera. But again, Israel has to do it. They've been forced to do it, because if they don't destroy Hamas, the October 7th will just be a preview of things to come. They'll be doing it more and more often. All right, so anyway, that's going on. That'll be a continuous story, obviously, for the next at least probably 6 weeks, unless there's a ceasefire, which things are possible. But as we're going to see, it doesn't look real good as we look at our first headline. Hamas agrees to free just 18 hostages unless Israel ends the war. That was what they agreed to without asking Israel's view on that. Among demands reported, terror group refuses to commit to freeing only live hostages, too. Increases demand for a number of Palestinians to be freed and rejects the notion they would be expelled from the Strip. In other words, their agreement was, all right, we're going to give you, as we see, 33 hostages. We're going to stretch it out. They're not going to necessarily all be alive, but that's only if you agree to the end of the war. Now we find out they're only going to free 18 hostages unless Israel agrees to the end of the war, according to a CNN report. They refuse to release only live hostages in the first phase, insist only 33 would be freed. This includes some who were killed. Now, this is interesting because we've talked about this before. There's something like 134 people unaccounted for that are assumed to be hostages. And yet, if they could release only 33, and of the 33, some of them are dead. How many are really still alive? We don't know because there's never been a count. The Red Cross has never been allowed to come in and do a count on the hostages, see how they're doing. So as we've worried about, and a lot of people have speculated, probably not that many are still alive. But again, we don't know because Hamas is not telling us. The terror group demands Israel, like we said, would not be able to oppose the freeing of any prisoner from its jail. So they can get rid, they can say, look, you have to free this murderer, that murderer for the hostage deal to go on, including Marwan Barghouti, who has been in prison for over 20 years, convicted of multiple murders. Actually, he's considered a leading candidate to replace Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Barghouti, the murderer, has that popularity, sadly, amongst the Palestinian Authority, where he actually could be the new leader if he was released in some type of hostage release. All right, headline 2. Now, Israeli officials say the U.S. knew about the changes to the ceasefire deal, but didn't brief Israel. The feeling is that Israel got played by the U.S. and mediators during the latest round of negotiations. We've been saying that for the last couple of days. There have been stories about the U.S., Israel being played by the U.S. They claim the Biden administration knew about the changes made to the ceasefire prisoner swap offered by Egypt and Qatar to Hamas, but failed to inform Israel about the changes. And then Hamas announces it accepted a ceasefire deal. And like we said yesterday, now Israel looks like, well, Israel's turned it down. In fact, the headline of one international paper says Israel now going into Rafah after turning down ceasefire deal. Well, no, they didn't turn down anything. There wasn't a deal. Hamas unilaterally said, this is what we're going to do. Now, U.S. believes Israel has been negotiating good faith, according to one official, but some other officials say they haven't. This is really interesting. Somebody who was unnamed says, well, Israel hasn't really been negotiating good faith. What a bunch of nonsense. This comes from the U.S., who is lying to the Israelis about, what Hamas is doing about their participation in this. And as we're going to see in a minute, stopping Israel from winning this war against Hamas. The Biden administration sees that Hamas's agreement to the ceasefire as a counteroffer, not a new proposal. And this episode, we're told now, has created deep disappointment and suspicion, well, rightly so, among senior Israeli officials about the U.S. role in the hostage deal that could negatively negatively influence negotiations going forward. Israel is sending a group to Cairo to talk, but they're not the A team. They're the B team. There's mid-level, people. They're nobody that's no decision makers. So just to look like they're at least talking about it, but nothing is happening. All right, now, so anyway, the third headline. The U.S., like we've said, has delayed arms shipment to Israel amidst internal pressure. Biden administration holds back tank ammunition, armored vehicles, and about $1 billion worth of artillery, mortar shells, although all this has already been approved by Congress. In other words, this has been approved. They're withholding what's been approved, delaying shipments of weapons. And when you read the article, amid increasing internal pressure in the United States, the article goes on and on to talk about which shipments has been delayed, 6,500 JDAM kits, joint direct attack munitions, which turn simple air bombs into smart and tangible bombs to Israel, worth about $260 million. That's been held up. On and on and on we go. And as you keep reading the articles, I keep wanting to find out why. Well, one reporter said last week the U.S. informed Israel that if Israel carries out an extensive operation in Rafah without coordinating it beforehand, it will lead to a delay in arms shipments and possibly a ban on using American weapons and ammunition. Under the terms of the American procurement, some weapons can't be prohibited from being used. In recent months, it's been reported that the U.S. is considering delaying shipments and prohibiting their use in Rafah. This seems to be exactly what's going on, even though Congress has approved it. And the president signed it, so they're supposed to ship it, but they've been delaying it. And again, not wanting to help Israel. Now, headline number 4, which is really interesting. They nixed local production. Now the IDF is short of armaments. There's a certain lawmaker who describes being sidelined by security officials when he wonders why Israel does not reduce its dependence upon others by supplying the IDF with locally produced bullets, shells, and bombs. He said, you sit in the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee and try to convince the Deputy Chief of Staff of the need of more armaments production lines, and he looks at you like you are some kind of fool that makes you feel like you're disturbing and should sit down and be quiet. This is how the lawmaker described his impressions during the budgetary meetings with senior defense officials in early May of last year, of course, before the October 7th event happened. In other words, what do you mean we have to produce our own weapons? We could just buy them. You wonder how much of a kickback these people get from buying these weapons, but we'll leave that for another day and someone else to talk about that. So anyway, Israel is half the weapons they get are from the United States, and they're being slowed down or slow walked by the Biden administration, which is not helping Israel. But again, as we said, this is not surprising. And finally, this 5th story. UN Security Council sets vote on turning Palestine into a de facto state. After the U.S. vetoed Palestine into an official state in the latest vote, Palestinians have found a workaround. They now ask to be recognized as a territory with all the same rights and qualifications of a state, including a vote in the UN matters, a move that cannot be blocked by any country's veto. So they're trying to do a workaround, sort of like Obama did in 2015 with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action when he did a deal with Iran. With the Security Council, it didn't go to Congress because Congress has to ratify any treaty that the U.S. makes. And so they made an agreement that JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, to do a work around Congress. Well, here now the UN Security Council is trying to work around the U.S. and basically make Palestine a state. Now, I got a question for you. It's a trivia question. It's the Holy Land, Arab rule. How long have Arabs ruled in the Holy Land? Historically, I'm going to leave that with you, and we're going to answer today in the second half. We'll talk about it, but I'm specifically Arab rule in the Holy Land. How many times in the history of the Holy Land has there been Arab rule? We'll talk about that, like I said, later today, about 7 hours from now, when we do our second breaking news, as we are doing that now for the foreseeable future, because you need to know what's going on. So much is happening. So let's summarize. The battle for Rafah is on. Hamas's agreement was to propose Israel, a proposal Israel had not seen. 18 hostages, or 33 in total. If 33 if Israel agrees to a ceasefire and the end of the war, only 18 if they don't. And of the 33, it could be, half of them could be just dead bodies. That's their idea of a hostage switch. The U.S. knew this. They did not tell Israel. Israel is concerned. There's weapons being held back. And again, the reason is because of the Israel going into Rafah. And the UN now is attempting to circumvent Security Council, make Palestine some sort of territory. All right, 3 of our signs of 25 signs we're near the end explains this, why the U.S. is not a player in Bible prophecy, why Israel continues to be out isolated, and why there's no chance for peace. Sign 7, continual search for peace in Israel. That's one of our signs of the end, and that's exactly what we see. They're not getting any peace, and they won't, because their neighbors want to destroy them. Sign 11, no superpower will intervene on Israel's behalf when they are invaded. Something will happen in the United States and its superpower status, which we're seeing right now. And finally, sign 21, there'll be a rise in anti-Semitism. The entire world will be against Israel. And that's what we're seeing develop right now. So again, those are documented in the book, 25 Signs. We're near the end. Please take advantage of it. It's a free download from our website, Educating Our World. All right, I'm Don Stewart. We'll be back with you in probably about 7 hours or so with the latest keep praying, keep spreading the news, the good news about Jesus Christ. It's the only hope that the world has. Until then, may the Lord richly, richly bless.